Taylor's work was fairly controversial on the human side of the balance, the operations and human balance. Taylor clearly tipped on the operational side of the scale. On the human side of the scale, he determined that management's responsibility were to do these five things. Number one, plan the work. Number two, carefully select the best workers. Note I made an asterisk there because we're going to come back to that in the next segment. Taylor had a lot to say about the character of workers in general. Many of the things that he said were highly insulting to workers, and so they really caused a public outcry, and more importantly, an internal outcry in organizations in the industrial complex. But we'll get to that in the next segment. It was also manager's responsibility to find that best way, that most efficient way, the most standardized way to do that. Unfortunately, because of human nature, managers were also taking the least amount of effort route to finding the best way. And so what they would do is essentially hire a bunch of people, find the best guy who is the fastest guy, and say, that's the best way to do it. Now just do it like him. And the comparison was between his piece rate, his output, versus other people's piece rate. Management's responsibility was to cooperate with the workers, which sounds like a good thing, but you can start to see that because the scale is tipping on the operational side, cooperation means I need to get you workers to make as much as you possibly can, and I really don't care how you do that, other than following this best way standard. So cooperation with the workers was a difficult thing. Taylor gave acknowledgement to it, but really didn't give any practical ways to make that happen. And then the last thing is don't let workers manage anything. Just let them do. And the whole story here is that workers in scientific management in this movement were really there to just do the work, to make as many pieces as you possibly can. Don't worry about managing it. Just do the work that's right in front of you. All we want is your hands. I always tell this story about being in the Navy for a period of time. In the Navy, we would have these things called all hands meetings. In the old Navy, in the old British Navy, do you know how the British Navy filled the positions on ships? There's a thing called press gangs, and press gangs would go out into the local taverns and buy a bunch of alcohol and beer for people at the bar until they would get really, really drunk, and then they would either pass out or the guys that were in these press gangs would go knock them on the heads, and they would wake up the next day out to sea on a ship, and so they were pressed into service on a ship. The Navy really didn't want them. The British Navy really didn't want them for their minds. The British Navy just wanted them for their hands. And so that's where the idea of all hands meetings and all hands came from. And Taylorism picks up on this idea as well. We don't want you to think about your work. We just want you to do the work. Make as many pieces as you possibly can. Let's take a look at what Taylor thought about workers in general in the next segment.